In a world of power, money, and betrayal, one woman will stop at nothing to preserve the life of luxury she's known, even if it means shedding innocent blood. A loving wife, a doting husband, and a young woman with a fresh set of desires, what could possibly go wrong? This is the shocking story of Monica and Richard Davis, a couple whose fairy tale marriage fell apart in a whirlwind of lies, affairs, and deadly jealousy. Their once perfect life crumbled as passion turned to betrayal, and betrayal turned to murder. Before we unravel this disturbing tale, like and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more stories that expose the darkest corners of human behavior. Monica Davis, 40, was living a life most women could only dream of. Poised, elegant, and accustomed to luxury, she had spent years perfecting the role of a devoted wife to a successful man. Her days were filled with designer shopping sprees, charity galas, and exclusive vacations to exotic destinations. Monica had always been the center of attention in social circles, admired for her beauty and grace. Behind the glamour, however, she often found herself reminiscing about the early days of her marriage, when life felt more grounded and love seemed unshakable. Richard Davis, at 48 years old, was the epitome of success. As the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, he had built an empire from the ground up. He was a man of ambition, determination, and vision, a provider who prided himself on giving Monica the best of everything. The sprawling mansion they shared, the fleet of luxury cars in the garage, and the private jet at their disposal were all testaments to his hard work. To the outside world, Richard appeared to have everything: wealth, power, and a beautiful wife. But even with all his accomplishments, he felt a growing emptiness, a void he couldn't quite explain. Their lives intersected more than a decade earlier, when Richard was a rising star in the business world, and Monica was a young woman with dreams of a life filled with love and adventure. They fell hard for each other, their connection fueled by ambition and mutual adoration. Together, they built a life that became the envy of everyone around them. Monica supported Richard through the grueling early years of his career, and as his wealth grew, so did their opulent lifestyle. For years, their marriage seemed unbreakable, a partnership rooted in trust and shared dreams. They threw lavish parties, attended high-profile events, and presented themselves as the ultimate power couple. Their home, with its sprawling gardens and marble interiors, was a sanctuary where every need was catered to. But as time went on, the foundation of their relationship began to crack. The passion that once defined their union faded into routine, and their conversations grew sparse. Despite the luxury that surrounded them, an unspoken distance crept into their lives, leaving both Monica and Richard yearning for something more. Their once unshakable bond had weakened, setting the stage for decisions and betrayals that would unravel everything they had built together. Richard's life took an unexpected turn the day he met Alyssa Reed. She was 28 years old, strikingly beautiful, and carried herself with an effortless confidence that turned heads wherever she went. Alyssa wasn't like the women Richard was accustomed to in his social circle. She was vibrant, curvy, and unapologetically bold, with an allure that was impossible to ignore. From the moment she walked into the high-end lounge where they first crossed paths, Richard felt an instant spark, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Their meeting wasn't coincidental. Alyssa had heard of Richard Davis through whispers in exclusive circles and had strategically placed herself in his orbit. She wasn't just beautiful, she was intelligent and cunning, fully aware of her power over men like Richard. When their eyes met across the room, she smiled, a knowing, teasing smile that pulled him in like a moth to a flame. Richard, who had long felt the dullness of his routine marriage, was mesmerized. Alyssa was everything Monica wasn't. Where Monica had grown comfortable in their structured, predictable life, Alyssa was spontaneous, fiery, and unpredictable. She challenged him in ways that excited him, made him feel alive again. Their first conversation was electric, filled with flirtation and the kind of effortless chemistry Richard hadn't felt in years. He began seeking out Alyssa's company, inventing excuses to see her. Lunch meetings turned into late-night rendezvous, and soon, Richard was spending more time with Alyssa than he was at home. With every encounter, he found himself falling deeper under her spell. She was a master at playing her role, offering him just enough attention and affection to keep him hooked but never allowing him to feel like he fully had her. For Richard, Alyssa became an obsession. He couldn't stop thinking about her, the way she laughed, the way she moved, the way she made him feel like a younger, more vital version of himself. It wasn't long before he started imagining a future with her. For the first time, he entertained the idea of taking Alyssa as his second wife. It wasn't conventional, but Richard wasn't thinking rationally. He was consumed by his feelings for her and convinced himself that he could balance his life with Monica and his newfound passion for Alyssa. But Alyssa had no interest in being anyone's wife, let alone playing second fiddle to Monica. She had no intentions of settling down or being tied to one man, no matter how wealthy he was. Alyssa was there for the thrill, the luxury, and the gifts, a fast car here, a diamond necklace there. She knew how to play the game, keeping Richard close but always slightly out of reach, ensuring he remained desperate for her attention. Despite her indifference to marriage, Richard refused to let her go. Alyssa became his escape from the monotony of his marriage, a secret oasis where he felt free from the burdens of his responsibilities. He began lavishing her with extravagant gifts, from designer handbags to trips to private islands, all in an effort to prove his devotion. Each gift was a symbol of how deeply he had fallen for her, and Alyssa accepted them with a sly smile, fully aware of the power she wielded over him. As his relationship with Alyssa deepened, Richard grew more distant from Monica. He no longer made an effort to hide his late nights or secretive phone calls. The man who once doted on his wife now seemed like a stranger, his mind consumed by thoughts of another woman. Alyssa had awakened something in Richard, but in doing so, she had also set the stage for a chain of events that would destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. Monica had always been sharp, observant, and attuned to Richard's habits. So, when he began coming home later than usual, his phone constantly buzzing with texts he brushed off as business, she knew something was amiss. At first, she ignored it, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the subtle changes in his demeanor, the distant conversations, the lack of warmth, the way his eyes seemed to drift past her as if she weren't even there, were impossible to dismiss. Monica felt the growing void between them, and it cut her deeper than she was willing to admit. But long before Alyssa Reed entered their lives, Monica had already found herself in a complicated entanglement. Kevin Harris, their trusted family lawyer, had always been there, a stable, calming presence amidst the chaos of their high-profile life. Kevin wasn't like Richard. He wasn't flashy or domineering. He was thoughtful, a man who listened, who noticed when Monica was struggling beneath the weight of being the perfect wife. Their connection had started innocently enough, with late-night conversations over legal matters that somehow veered into personal confessions. Monica had never intended to cross the line. She'd vowed to be loyal to Richard, even when their marriage grew stale. But Kevin had a way of making her feel seen, cherished, even when her own husband seemed indifferent. He noticed the little things, when she changed her hairstyle, when she was quieter than usual, when she laughed a little less. He asked about her day and actually cared about her answers. Slowly, those moments of kindness became something more. Their first kiss had been a moment of weakness, an impulsive act that left Monica reeling with guilt. But the guilt wasn't enough to stop her from wanting more. Kevin made her feel alive in ways she hadn't felt in years. He touched her with a gentleness that reminded her of the woman she used to be before her life was consumed by appearances and expectations. With him, there was no pretense, no need to keep up the facade of perfection. He knew her flaws and embraced them. Their affair deepened over time, becoming a refuge for Monica as her marriage to Richard became increasingly strained. Kevin became her confidant, the one person she could turn to when the cracks in her life threatened to split her apart. But their relationship wasn't just about comfort, it was charged with emotions she couldn't control. The passion, the stolen moments, the whispered promises, it all felt intoxicating, yet terrifying. Kevin, for his part, adored Monica, but he also knew the risks they were taking. He hated seeing her in pain, hated the way Richard seemed to take her for granted. But he also knew she wasn't ready to leave her husband, no matter how distant Richard became. Monica wasn't just tied to Richard by love, she was tied to him by a lifestyle, by the life they had built together. Walking away wasn't an option, not yet. As Richard's behavior became more suspicious, Monica found herself leaning on Kevin even more. Each late-night rendezvous with him was a mixture of solace and escape, a temporary reprieve from the loneliness that had seeped into her life. But as much as Kevin filled the emotional void, Monica couldn't ignore the ache of betrayal she felt from Richard. The man who had once promised her the world was slipping away, and in her heart, she knew things were spiraling out of control. Monica's affair with Kevin wasn't just a rebellion against her husband's neglect, it was a desperate attempt to reclaim the parts of herself that Richard had long forgotten. But even as she sought comfort in Kevin's arms, a storm was brewing in her marriage, one that would soon force her to confront not just Richard's betrayal, but her own. Richard's infatuation with Alyssa Reed had grown into something far more consuming than he ever expected. He was no longer just enamored by her beauty or captivated by her fiery personality, he was utterly and hopelessly in love. Alyssa had become the center of his universe, and everything else, his marriage, his responsibilities, even his reputation, began to fade into the background. She was his escape, his muse, his chance at rediscovering a version of himself he thought he had lost long ago. For years, Richard had justified his growing distance from Monica by convincing himself that she had changed. She no longer made him feel alive, no longer inspired him. Their marriage, once filled with shared dreams and laughter, now felt like a cold, transactional partnership. In Alyssa, he saw everything Monica wasn't: youthful, passionate, and brimming with energy. She made him feel desired, needed, and wanted, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about love for Richard, it was about starting over. He wanted a fresh slate, a life free from the routines and responsibilities that had weighed him down. In his mind, Alyssa represented that fresh start. She didn't ask for anything beyond the moment, didn't expect him to maintain the facade of perfection he had built with Monica. With Alyssa, he felt free, and for that, he wanted to give her the world. One evening, over an intimate dinner in a secluded villa he had rented for them, Alyssa offhandedly mentioned her fears about being alone in the future. She wasn't fishing for promises, but Richard took her words to heart. He began to see her as not just a lover but someone who deserved security and a future. That night, the idea took root in his mind: Alyssa should be the one to inherit everything he had worked so hard to build. Richard contacted Kevin Harris, the family lawyer, to discuss revising his will. He wanted to ensure Alyssa was taken care of, no matter what. Without hesitation, he instructed Kevin to draft a new will, one that would leave the majority of his estate to Alyssa and significantly reduce Monica's share. Richard framed it as a matter of practicality, but Kevin could see the recklessness in his decision. Kevin, who was intimately involved with Monica, knew this revelation would devastate her. For all her flaws, Monica had stood by Richard through the toughest years of his career. She had sacrificed her own dreams to support him, to help him build the empire he now wanted to hand over to a woman he had known for only a few months. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind, and Kevin couldn't let it slide. Later that evening, Kevin broke the news to Monica. The words hit her like a freight train. For years, she had been Richard's rock, his partner, the woman who had held him together when the pressure of success threatened to tear him apart. And now, after everything she had given up for him, he was planning to erase her from his legacy, planning to leave everything they had built to a woman who had simply waltzed into his life and stolen his heart. Monica's devastation quickly gave way to anger. She couldn't believe the man she had loved and sacrificed so much for could betray her so easily. Everything she had endured, the long nights waiting for him to come home, the emotional distance, the loneliness, had been for nothing. In just a few short months, Alyssa had succeeded in tearing apart what Monica had spent decades building. As Kevin comforted her, Monica's mind raced. The betrayal was too great to ignore, too personal to let go. She couldn't allow Richard to rewrite their story, to hand over the life they had built to a woman who had done nothing to earn it. For the first time in her life, Monica felt consumed by the need for revenge. And as Kevin's words lingered in her mind, a dark thought began to take shape, a thought that would soon spiral into something far more dangerous. Monica's jealousy, once a slow burn, now raged like a wildfire. The betrayal was too much. Richard wasn't just leaving her for Alyssa emotionally, he was cutting her out of the life they had built together, leaving her with nothing. Every time she thought about him smiling at Alyssa, giving her everything they had worked for, the anger boiled in her chest. It wasn't fair. She had given her youth, her loyalty, and her heart to Richard, and now he was throwing it all away for a fleeting obsession. Kevin, always ready to stoke the flames of her anger, became her sounding board. He listened intently as she vented about Richard, nodding sympathetically and whispering dangerous ideas into her ear. One evening, as they sat in a dimly lit room at Kevin's office, he leaned in close. "Monica," he said softly, "you've given him everything, and now he's trying to leave you with nothing. Don't you think it's time you take control of the situation before it's too late?" Monica's heart raced at the implication, but she didn't protest. Kevin's words planted a dark seed in her mind, one that quickly began to grow. It wasn't just about protecting her share of the fortune, it was about making Richard pay for his betrayal. Days later, Monica confronted Richard in their expansive living room. She couldn't keep the anger inside any longer. "How dare you," she spat, her voice trembling with rage. Richard, caught off guard, furrowed his brow. "What are you talking about, Monica? You're planning to leave everything to her," Monica hissed. "Alyssa. You think I don't know about her? About your little plan to erase me from your life and hand over everything we've built to that?" "Stop," Richard interrupted, his tone icy. "How do you even know about this?" Monica froze for a moment, her mind scrambling. In her fury, she let her guard down. "I know because Kevin told me," she snapped. Richard's expression shifted from anger to shock. "Kevin? Our lawyer? Why would he tell you that?" Monica hesitated, realizing her mistake. "Because he cares about me," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "More than you ever have." Richard's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're sleeping with him, aren't you?" The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap, and Monica didn't deny it. The confrontation escalated, their voices rising, cutting through the quiet luxury of their home. Years of resentment, betrayal, and bitterness spilled out in a torrent of words, each accusation sharper than the last. In the heat of the argument, Richard turned away, muttering under his breath, dismissing her as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience. That was the breaking point. Monica saw red. Her eyes darted to the side table where Richard kept his personal firearm. She opened the drawer and grabbed the gun, without thinking, without fully realizing what she was doing. "Monica," Richard started to say, turning back to face her. But before he could finish, the gun went off. The sound was deafening, echoing through the room as Richard staggered back, clutching his chest. The look of shock on his face was seared into Monica's mind as he collapsed onto the floor. Blood pooled around him, staining the pristine white marble tiles. As the gunshot echoed through the massive house, it startled one of the household staff, who had been cleaning in a nearby wing. Rushing toward the sound, the worker found Richard lying motionless in a pool of blood. Trembling, she immediately called 911, her voice shaking as she reported the incident. Meanwhile, Monica had already fled the scene, leaving behind the chaotic aftermath. The echo of the gunshot still rang in her ears as she sped away, her mind racing with panic and the gravity of what she had just done. The police quickly arrived at the scene, alerted by the housekeeper's frantic 911 call. Richard's lifeless body was discovered in the living room, the gun positioned near his hand in an attempt to stage a self-defense scenario. However, the inconsistencies in the scene were immediately apparent. The angle of the gunshot didn't match the supposed struggle, and there were no signs of a fight. Monica, who had fled the house moments after pulling the trigger, became the primary suspect. Surveillance footage from the estate showed her leaving the property in a rush, her demeanor frantic and suspicious. When officers brought her in for questioning, Monica denied any involvement, insisting she wasn't home at the time of Richard's death. But her story quickly unraveled and forensic tests revealed her fingerprints all over the firearm. Investigators also noted the absence of Richard's fingerprints on the weapon, confirming that the gun had never been in his hand. This discovery placed Monica squarely at the scene of the crime, leaving her no room to explain away her involvement. As the investigation deepened, more damning evidence surfaced. Kevin, Richard's lawyer and Monica's secret lover, was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, he revealed their affair and admitted that Richard had been planning to revise his will, leaving his fortune to Alyssa. Kevin's confession provided a clear motive: Monica had killed Richard to stop him from signing the new will and cutting her out of his estate. Digital evidence further sealed Monica's fate. Investigators uncovered text messages between Monica and Kevin discussing Richard's affair and hinting at desperate measures. One message from Monica read, "I won't let him throw everything away for her. He doesn't deserve to win." With her fingerprints on the gun and a clear motive established, Monica's guilt was undeniable. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, her attempts to stage the crime scene and evade suspicion completely dismantled. Her desperate bid to protect her lifestyle had not only cost Richard his life but also destroyed her own. Monica's trial became a media spectacle as the details of her crime and affair with Kevin were exposed. Kevin testified under pressure, admitting his role in advising Monica to kill Richard. The damning evidence, including her fingerprints on the gun and incriminating text messages, left no doubt about her guilt. The jury deliberated briefly before finding Monica guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kevin, though not directly involved in the murder, faced charges of conspiracy and was disbarred. Monica's once glamorous life of wealth and privilege was gone, replaced by the grim reality of a prison cell, a fitting end to a tale of greed, betrayal, and desperation. Monica's jealousy and desperation led her down a dark and twisted path, showing just how far one person will go to maintain a life of luxury. In the end, her actions led not only to her husband's death but also to her own destruction. What do you think? Was Monica justified in her actions, or was she simply a woman scorn driven to madness? Could she have found another way to confront Richard? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more gripping stories of betrayal, greed, and shocking twists.